For nearly 2,000 years, billions of people have pictured Jesus in almost exactly the same way. Long brown hair, blue eyes, fair skin, a neatly trimmed beard. But here is the question. What if almost every image you have ever seen is wrong? Not spiritually, not symbolically, but historically. Tonight we are using archaeology, anthropology, ancient texts, and artificial intelligence to answer one of history's greatest mysteries. What did Jesus of Nazareth actually look like? To understand Jesus' appearance, we first have to travel back to the 1st century. The Roman Empire ruled Judea. Jerusalem was crowded. Nazareth was little more than a small agricultural village, with perhaps only a few hundred residents. Jesus was not European. He was not Roman. He was not Greek. He was a Jewish man born into the Middle East around 2,000 years ago. And that changes everything. One surprising fact: the Bible never actually describes Jesus' face. Not once. The Gospels tell us about his words, his miracles, his compassion, his sacrifice. But they remain almost completely silent about his physical appearance. Why? Because for the earliest Christians, who Jesus was mattered infinitely more than how he looked. The familiar image of Jesus didn't appear immediately. Over centuries, artists painted him according to their own cultures. In Europe, Jesus slowly became European, blonde in some countries, dark-haired in others, even dressed like medieval kings. These paintings reflected faith, not forensic history. Modern archaeology paints a different picture. Excavations in Galilee reveal ordinary Jewish villages, stone houses, simple clothing, limited nutrition, hard physical labor. Jesus worked as a tekton, traditionally translated as carpenter, but more accurately describing a craftsman or builder. That meant daily manual work, strong shoulders, calloused hands, a body shaped by labor, not luxury. Anthropologists have studied skeletal remains from 1st century Judea. The average Jewish male was likely around 5 feet 1 to 5 feet 5 inches tall. Lean, dark-haired, brown-eyed, olive-toned skin. Compact but muscular from constant physical work. Jesus would almost certainly have resembled the people around him. Not someone who stood apart because of extraordinary beauty. In fact, the prophet Isaiah contains an intriguing statement often connected to the Messiah. He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him. Whether interpreted prophetically or symbolically, the idea is remarkably consistent. Jesus likely looked ordinary, approachable, someone who could disappear into a... There is another clue. When Judas betrayed Jesus, he identified him with a kiss. Why? Because among the disciples, Jesus wasn't visually distinctive enough for soldiers to recognize immediately. If he had possessed striking or unusual features, such identification may not have been necessary. His clothing was probably simple: a wool tunic, a mantle, leather sandals. Nothing royal, nothing extravagant. Even the seamless garment mentioned during the crucifixion was not luxurious, only unusually well made. Jesus lived simply and likely dressed accordingly. What about his hair? Popular paintings often show long, flowing hair. Yet Jewish men of the period generally wore shorter hair than Renaissance artists imagined. The Apostle Paul even remarks that excessively long hair on men was viewed as unusual in his cultural context. Jesus almost certainly wore a practical hairstyle, not the flowing locks seen in countless masterpieces. His complexion? Middle Eastern, sun-exposed, weathered. Years spent walking hundreds of miles across Galilee and Judea would leave visible marks. This was not the face of someone sheltered indoors. It was the face of someone who lived among ordinary people every day. Today, anthropologists combine archaeology, genetics, ancient population studies, facial anatomy, and AI-assisted reconstruction. The goal is not to identify Jesus specifically. That is impossible. Instead, researchers estimate what an average Jewish man from first-century Galilee most likely looked like. Perhaps the greatest surprise isn't that Jesus looked different from the paintings we've inherited. It's that the Savior, remembered by billions, may have looked remarkably like the ordinary people he came to serve. A humble Jewish craftsman, a traveler, a teacher, a man whose face reflected the land of Galilee and whose message transformed the world. If this journey changed the way you think about history, leave a comment below sharing what surprised you most. And if you'd like to explore more evidence-based biblical mysteries, subscribe for future documentaries where archaeology, history, and modern science bring the ancient world back to life. Because sometimes the truth is even more remarkable than tradition.